Some things in the Fab world have been a little high tension as of late, so today I wanted to do something fun. I'm super excited about the new Dorinthea, dubbing her Thea2. She appears to fix the primary issue that OG Thea has, which is the first hit problem. But Andrew, how can we even talk about her until we know what the new Dawnblade does? And while that is fair, my contention is that she only gets better once we actually know what it is and what it does. So today I'm talking Thea2, why I'm excited, and how she just might set us up to punish all these decks that don't block, and thus could greatly impact the current popular minimal blocking approach to Flesh and Blood. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again. A fabulous cast. That's right. Thanks for checking in today. Talking Dorinthea. That's right. Even a little bit of speculation. So before we get started, I just want to remind all of you guys that we are sponsored here by our friends over at FabDB. You guys know them. You guys love them. The best resource available on the web for deck building, deck research, collection management, collection research even. And while you're over there, make sure to consider upgrading your account to unlock all sorts of other cool features that can only enhance your experience. So thank you to our friends over at FabDB. All right, so today, talking two-player set Dorinthea. You guys will notice that we are doing this one PTI style, just because it's kind of fun to do it that way, and it lets me throw up an extra graphic. So before we get into this, or not before we get into this, as part of getting into this, before we go into the details, I do want to speak to, part of the concern is, well, it's, she specifically speaks to Dawnblade Resplendent. We don't know what Resplendent is. How are we going to evaluate her in context of that? And I think what we can do is not get too hung up on that, right? And instead look at how she changes. So what I want to do first is let's just assume for the first part of this conversation that Dorinthea's new Dawnblade Resplendent is just a vanilla 1/3 weapon, right? Don't worry about the text. Don't worry about anything like that. We can speculate on that later. And you guys will notice over there that two of those are a different color. That is because those are going into more of the speculation and thoughts kind of range, okay? So for the purpose of this conversation, let's just assume that it's a vanilla 1/3, right? Now, well, what makes you say that? It could be a 2 cost, it could be a 2/4, it could be a 0/2 or something. I mean, probably not, right? But point is, I think it's a 1. I think it's going to embody, I think it's reasonable, right? Because you can assume that it's going to embody the original Dawnblade in some way. I do believe it's going to be a 1 cost weapon, because it really screws up kind of the way that Warrior, if it wasn't, it would screw up the way that Warrior works, which is generally something to pump and give a go again, something to swing, and then something to swing again. And then if you have additional tricks, you got to come up with additional tricks, right? So I think that 1 cost is there, whether you could say 1/2, 1/3, whatever it is, right? But for the purpose of the discussion, let's just assume it's blank, and then whatever it does only makes it better, right? That's the way we're going to do it. All right, so Dorinthea2, Dorinthea Quicksilver Prodigy. The first time her weapon, the Resplendent, gains go again each turn, you may attack an additional time with it this turn, right? So basically, it's the same as Dorinthea, old OG Dorinthea. It's the same as OG Dorinthea, except it fixes her current challenge of what happens if you don't hit, right? Because I already spoke to kind of the 3-pitch plan for Warrior, which is pump, swing, swing, right? Or facilitate, swing, swing, whatever it may be, right? But a lot of times you'll leave yourself that 1 resource for your turn, but they do block you out, and you don't get to swing again, even though you had something floating. Or maybe you do have a 1 cost out for blood or something in your hand, you have to spin it, but now, even though you hit, you don't have enough money to swing again. We've all been there playing Warrior, right? So if you compare how Kassai currently operates as compared to how Dorinthea operates, Kassai is much better positioned, because as long as you have go again, you can still do things, right? You get that second swing, and that's why much of the Kassai stuff, as you guys are familiar with these days, is really focused on the second swing. And I'm not necessarily saying that's where we go here, but you still she fixes that problem, right? So I think that this is a really great way to bring Dorinthea back into the fold. And then you combine it with the new card that we've seen, the new spec, Glistening Steelblade. So for one, your next Dawnblade attack, it is a spec, your next Dawnblade attack has Go Again. Whenever Dawnblade hits a hero, put a +1 counter on it, Go Again. Now, obviously, this works with the OG Thea, it works with OG Dawnblade. There's some stuff there, right? But I want to talk about this in context of new of Thea 2. Right, within context there, it's it's very similar to a driving blade or something like that. It's actually way better than a driving. Well, you don't get the pump on it, right? But it does what you need it to do, which is to give the sword Go Again, right? This would definitely take the spot like of a traditional like Warrior's Valor, where you have to hit to get the Go Again, something like that, right? Now, traditionally with Dorinthea, Warrior's Valor has been fine, because if you don't hit on Warrior's Valor and you don't get the Go Again, then you can't swing again anyway, right? Because you didn't hit. So not having the Go Again doesn't really matter as much. But in this case, obviously you want something more like Glistening Steelblade, and then maybe you come up with the pump somehow elsewise. Okay? This is going to be very, very strong, and it's definitely going to play into what we're talking about here in a little bit. And then don't forget, of course, we've also seen spoiled the new mentor. This one's very interesting because it provides right? The mentors that we have seen thus far have been a little interesting, a little trickier to use because they have to go into the arsenal and they have to get played. This one's interesting in that it clogs up your arsenal and it pulls a specific one, but it actively is doing something while in the arsenal. So we'll have to see how that plays out. It's not that hard to trigger, but it still sits in there. So we'll have to see how that functions overall. Probably not going to be more than maybe like a one of, but again, we'll have to see. This one's probably going to depend on what the upside, right? If it's a combo piece, it's probably going to depend on what the upside of that combo is. So yes, in that case, I do think we need to hold on evaluating that until we know what Resplendent does. All right, so now let's get into that, right? So Dawnblade 2, Dawnblade Resplendent. We don't know what it is, but likely, I think that it's going to be worse, quote unquote, than OG Dawnblade. Now, the reason I think that is that functionally, new Dorinthea, I believe, is better. So in that case, as a balancing, you would naturally think that, it's not going to be, there would be no point for it to be the same as current Dawnblade, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't do that, right? So I think it's going to be worse in some fashion. I do think that likely they will keep the same theme going on, where there will be still, obviously we've seen with the spec, there's something to do with counters. I don't think that's just a hit back to the OG Dorinthea. I think that's for the new Dorinthea as well. So there will likely be something to do with counters, but it likely won't be as strong with the counters, just as a balancing mechanic of it being easier to swing more times, right? So, there will almost certainly be interplay with counters. We've seen that, but I don't think it's going to be maybe as easy, and maybe conversely, maybe not as easy to lose them. So we'll see there. I do still think it'll be one resource. We already spoke to that. And then the next part, which is kind of silly, I suppose, but it's not, because it actually plays in, right? But is this going to be one-handed or two-handed, right? And the reason, or he's like, well, Dawnblade's a two-handed weapon. It should be, right? But it's not, right? If you look in the lore, you look at Steelblade Supremacy, she's doing the fencing thing, and in that case, you're like, okay, I understand why it's a two-handed weapon, because she has to have the other hand free, right? But then you also have Dauntless, who I'm pretty sure that's Dorinthea on Dauntless, and in that case, it's like a broadsword, right? So, again, I'm pretty sure that Dawnblade is the one in Steelblade Supremacy, right? Which means that it's technically a one-handed weapon. So it would be really interesting if Dawnblade was one-handed. And the reason that matters is because of all the love that came in the supplemental set that basically really just feeds Kassai for the most part right now. So I should say mostly feeds the Sabers. It can help the Axes too. But for the most part, all of that kind of feeds into Kassai, right? But you pick up all sorts of stuff, primarily Blade Runner, right? Blade Runner is easily the best warrior card to come out of the last set, and that would fit in really, really, really well with all of this package here, right? So I'm hoping it'll be one-handed. Probably it'll maintain two-handed, but you can see there's an argument. I mean, it's a one-handed weapon, and like, I don't know that you have to have this handling, hey, right? I don't know that you have to have that. So it could be one-handed with all the support we got. So that'll be definitely something to look for and see the impact there. That said, if it's two-handed, I think it'll be just fine. There's enough support for that with glistening steel blade. So kind of to the point of this is, these things right here, the counters on Dawnblade are the scariest thing to see for someone who doesn't like or can't afford to block, right? Now, sure, Dorinthea is not very well positioned within the current competitive meta, but I won an armory with her just last weekend, right? If you can get the right matchups, which I did, I was fortunate I got the right matchups, and once you start getting some counters on, I mean, we've all seen it in the past, right? These things, if you can't keep them off, are devastating, right? So in a meta overall where people are not overall blocking as much as they certainly used to back in the day, right? Back in the day, someone who can consistently put counters on and get stronger over time if you're not able to take them off is a huge, massive threat to the meta. So I do think that, if you draw the analogy of a revamped Dorinthea coming out, I think it stands to put a lot of pressure on a lot of those decks that don't do that. And by putting pressure on decks that don't do that, then it gives chance for those other decks that couldn't get in to get in. And I think we could really open up a much more tactical, not that it's not tactical now, right? But I think you could open up a very different type of game where blocking starts to maybe matter a little bit more, and building your deck to not always wombo combo, but maybe be a little more consistent, right? Because that's where we are kind of now. It's kind of just a swing for the fence and keep the pressure on type of deal. And, now if we're building decks for consistency, you're looking at 2, maybe 3 card hands, as opposed to always needing some 4 card or even a 5 card hand. I think it could really change things, and I'm very interested to see where that goes. It'll also be because also Brute historically, right? She's in the 2-player set, counter Brute. Brute historically has been in need of a 3 card hand. You kind of typically dump the one. I mean, that was OG Rhinar, right? Was you dumped the card that you didn't need. You had the card you wanted to play, the card you wanted to pay, and the card you wanted to discard. And in that case, you were really just using blocking almost to free up your hand, or to set up your hand, I should say. So it'll be interesting to see how they do that, because you'd think that she would be in a pretty advantageous position within that set, but I'm sure they've thought of that. But again, like I said, I'm very excited to see if this all works out, if you can continue to build up strength over time, essentially her to gain momentum represented by these counters. What can that do to the meta overall? I think it's a very interesting, very, very exciting. That's why I'm excited. Not only because I like her, but I'm very excited to see how it can change where I think Fab has gone over the last couple sets, which is, less of a focus on blocking than there used to be, right? All right, so now I want to move into these next 2 things are the speculation. So next set, right? And if you don't like speculation, normally we don't do it here, but I do think there's some reasonable lines we can draw. But if you don't want to, I understand that. Thank you for joining at this point. All right, so now talking next set. Basically, it boils down to this, right? I would be shocked, right? I believe Warrior and Brute will be in the next set in some fashion, right? Because it seems short-sighted to me and a bit of a bait and switch if they sell a new player set that really isn't backed up by a more new and exciting product. You know what I mean? So the 2-player set, they'd be like, hey, look, here's this new hero. Here are these 2 new heroes, a Warrior and a Brute, and all these sets that aren't technically in print anymore are the ones that support them. I don't buy that, right? So I do think that coming up in the next set will be Warrior and Brute in some fashion. I suspect it'll probably be the adult heroes of these to help support this. I mean, sure, maybe not. I mean, again, we're speculating, so could be completely wrong there. But it seems to me that would be kind of a dirty move, right? To only have them be supported, to have you not be able to grow into a CC as a player by buying the 2-player set. So hopefully that is the case, which means that there would be additional supports on top of that. Now, that kind of feeds into my next issue here, or next item that I want to talk about here, which is the let's be honest, the concern we're all having about the classic battle set, which is, oh my god, that specialization looks freaking amazing. How many copies do I need? How many copies do I need to buy? Now, at the very least, we know these are Blitz decks, and best case scenario, you're going to have 2 copies of each of the spec in the Blitz decks, which means that everybody, you can partner with a buddy, so you'll have to buy 3 of them between the 2 of you to have full play sets, right? Not cracking any eggs there. Everybody's been talking about that. If for whatever chance there's only 1 of the specialization in there, you'd have to buy 3 of them. So that would be not good. So I think that would be a bad fault there. Now, none of that's news. That's all been talked about. Here I want to take it to the next step, right? So if you combine what I just said, which is I suspect that these 2 classes will be supported in the next set. If those specs are printed in the next set and people don't know that and just ran out and bought 2 or 3 of these, I think you're going to have a lot of feel bad moments. So again, there's a lot of if-thens there, right? There's a lot of down the if-then train there. But if this doesn't work out right, I think you're going to have a lot of people upset. Well, kind of either way, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of people. If there's only, I mean, that's the biggest worst thing is that if there's only 1 of these in these, that's going to be bad, right? People are not going to be happy about that. And then maybe you are running up into the product shortage range, and then it very clearly wasn't designed for a new player set. So that'll not be good. But on top of that, like I said, and again, it's an if-then, but on top of that, if they then do release, because I want to point out, and this is not a catch-all, right? But I want to point out that it's listed as a Majestic. Now, so were the mentors from the Monarch, right? The mentors that were in the Monarch starter decks, precons, also were Majestic rarity, right? So that doesn't mean anything, except that if it were to be reprinted in the future, it would be at said rarity probably, right? But you can't imagine, or you can imagine that if they are indeed supporting these 2 heroes in the next booster set, or the next full set, you can imagine that they would potentially have those cards in there. So if it ends up being, I mean, basically it boils down to this. If it does end up being that way, it will be fine as long as players know ahead of time, right? So, if the plan is to reprint Glistening Steelblade and some of the associated, like, I suspect having the mentor, in that case, having the mentor would probably be exclusive to Classic Battles, just like it was in the precons. Having the spec be there and forcing people to go out and buy multiple copies to get that seems like a fine line to cross to me. So that will be very interesting to see. Now, I realize we've gotten off the spec of Dorinthea, but it's all tied together, and all just kind of some thoughts I've had around it. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But yeah, so we'll see how that handles. So anyway, that's really it for today. I just wanted to, I really am excited, not just because she's somebody who I enjoy playing, but because what Dorinthea does, or has historically done, is impacted the meta, even if from the sideline. And right now, she's so not well positioned, because when she can get up against some of those matchups, she actually does pretty well, right? So that's why I think if you can take Dorinthea, improve her a little bit so she has a little bit better consistency against, quite frankly, the decks that do like to block, then she can, and again, that just sounds like, I realize that statement sounds like power creep, right? But having someone in there who can really punish, who can consistently punish people who don't want to block, will absolutely change how Flesh and Blood looks like currently, right? So I'm very excited to see how that all falls out. Obviously, lots more to learn about this with Brute and all that, but like I said, I just wanted to talk about something a little more fun today, a little lighthearted, and that'll do it. So anyway, let me know what you guys are thinking. Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you not care? Fair enough. Are you excited about it? I am too. So anyway, folks, thanks for joining, and go Commando.